Hey, it's Mark here, and welcome to the next edition of the Employee Survival Guide, where I tell you, as always, what your employer does definitely not want you to know about, and a lot more.
Welcome to another episode of the Employee Survival Guide, produced by employment attorney Mark Carey.
Glad to be here.
You know, when we think about our daily jobs, we usually we focus on the tasks right in front of us, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Just the emails, the meetings, trying to hit quotas. But there is this invisible web of rules governing literally every single interaction you have at work.
Mm-hmm.
And today, we're looking at what happens when the reality of your daily workplace culture violently collides with employment law.
It is not a pretty collision.
No, it's not. I mean, imagine walking onto a factory floor. You're just trying to do your job, and suddenly you find yourself caught in this incredibly complex, high-stakes legal chess match.
Right.
That is exactly what we are dissecting today. We're tracing this whole journey from the very first internal HR complaints all the way to a major 2026 federal judge's ruling.
Yeah, and we have a massive stack of primary source documents for this deep dive into the source material. These are straight from the federal court in the District of Connecticut.
The case is Tevin Cagle and Gerald Robinson versus Duro-Hilex Poly, LLC, or DHP for short.
Right.
And we are looking at the explosive amended complaint from the plaintiffs, the corporate defendant's formal answer and affirmative defenses, and this really crucial March 2026 summary judgment ruling by Judge Janet C. Hall.
Yeah, and the sheer volume of documentation here, it gives us an incredibly rare, just unfiltered look into the machinery of federal employment litigation.
Because usually this stuff is hidden, right?
Exactly. Usually these disputes happen entirely behind closed doors. They get buried in confidential settlements, but here, everything is out in the open.
Wow.
But, before we go any further, it is critical to establish our baseline for this discussion.
Right. The ground rules.
Yes. We are strictly impartial observers here. We are not a jury. We are not rendering a verdict, and we are absolutely not taking sides.
Definitely not.
We are just taking these documents at face value to understand the mechanics of the law. Our mission is to unpack how legal claims of, discrimination, retaliation, and hostile work environments are constructed.
And how massive corporations systematically defend against those claims.
Precisely. And ultimately, how a federal judge weighs the scales when both sides present just irreconcilable versions of reality.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly grasp the legal arguments, you, the listener, need to visualize the environment where this all started.
Yeah, set the scene.
We aren't talking about, like, a quiet, carpeted office building here.
No, not at all.
The setting is a DHP manufacturing facility in Meriden, Connecticut. They produce plastic and paper bags. It is loud, it is fast-paced, and it revolves entirely around heavy machinery.
It's an intense environment.
Very intense. And into this environment enter our two plaintiffs. First, we have Tevin Cagle. He was hired in September 2021. And the complaint notes he is of Jamaican heritage.
Yeah.
And critically, this is very important, he has severe visual impairment.
Right. Keep that in mind.
And then 2 months later, Gerald Robinson is hired. He is African-American. Both men start as packers on the floor, and they are quickly promoted to machine operators on the third shift, the overnight shift.
And, the timing in that specific shift assignment, they are foundational to understanding the allegations here.
How so?
Well, the third shift in any manufacturing plant is notoriously isolated.
Oh, sure.
There is less upper management present, the culture is often much more insulated, and the workforce dynamics become highly concentrated. According to the plaintiff's complaint, for almost their entire tenure, Cagle and Robinson were the only two Black or African-American employees in the entire facility.
Wow. The entire facility.
That's what the complaint alleges. The workforce was highly segmented. The vast majority of the floor employees were of Indian heritage, specifically speaking Gujarati or Hindi or Hispanic.
Okay.
But the management structure above them, including Supervisor David Signore and Production Manager Richard Bolognese, was largely Caucasian.
Reading through this initial setup, it honestly immediately reminded me of being dropped into a high-stakes escape room.
That's a good way to put it.
Right. I mean, imagine you are hired for a job.
Yeah.
You walk in, and you realize you just don't have the rule book. Everyone else is speaking a language you literally don't understand. They all seem to know the unwritten codes, and you are completely structurally isolated.
Yeah, it's disorienting.
So my question is it unusual for a workplace demographic to be this segmented by shift and role? And how does that inherently set the stage for the kind of isolation we are seeing in these documents?
Well, demographic clustering like that is actually quite common.
Really?
Yeah, particularly in manufacturing or agriculture, logistics. Companies often rely heavily on employee referral programs.
Oh, I see. Like bring your friends.
Exactly, which naturally leads to clusters of specific ethnic or linguistic groups working the exact same shifts. The cluster itself is completely legal.
Right. It just happens.
Right. An employer can absolutely have a predominantly Gujarati-speaking workforce on the overnight shifts. The legal precariousness begins when that demographic makeup is allegedly weaponized.
Weaponized.
Yeah. Demographic isolation is a reality, but disparate treatment is a violation of the law.
Okay.
If a prevailing group uses their shared language or culture to intentionally freeze out someone of a different race or national origin, and management just turns a blind eye, the environment shifts. It goes from being merely demographically clustered to legally hostile.
Right. And there is also this immediate financial allegation that just sets a tone of mistrust from day one.
The wage issue.
Yeah. Robinson claims that upon his promotion to machine operator, he was promised an initial training wage of $18 an hour, which would bump up to $19.75 once his training was complete.
Right.
But he alleges he never received that bump. He claims that non-black operators were routinely paid the higher rate.
And look at how DHP handles that in their answer.
Right. They use that standard legal deflection. They state they are, quote, without sufficient knowledge to admit or deny, unquote, what other specific operators were paid.
Yeah, it's a very common maneuver.
But the seed of disparate treatment is planted right there in the paperwork.
It absolutely is. And, we also really have to highlight a crucial piece of administrative maneuvering by the plaintiffs regarding Tevin Cagle's disability.
Yes, the visual impairment.
Right. The complaint emphatically states that Cagle explicitly disclosed his severe visual impairment during his initial interview with HR manager Christine Kurtzenko and production manager Bolognese.
He put it right on the table.
Exactly, before he was even hired.
Which is a very strategic move, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you are listening to this and you have a workplace accommodation need, disclosing it up front basically locks the employer in.
It does.
Because under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, an employer cannot be held liable for failing to accommodate a disability they didn't know about.
That's right.
By documenting that interview disclosure, Cagle's attorneys are building a wall around his ADA claims. They're saying, look, you knew about this impairment from day one, so every subsequent failure in training or safety protocol has to be viewed through the lens of that known disability.
That is the exact mechanism of the law at play. The employer is now on constructive notice.
Constructive notice, okay.
Yeah. Every single interaction on that factory floor is now legally bound by the interactive process required by the ADA.
So we have the players, we have the demographic isolation, the alleged wage disparity, and the known disability.
The stage is set.
Yeah, it really is. So let's look at how the daily interactions allegedly deteriorated. Because according to the complaint, the language barrier wasn't just like an accidental hurdle. It was actively deployed as a weapon.
Right.
Training is the lifeblood of a factory job. If you can't run the machine, you lose your job.
Simple as that.
Cagle alleges his trainer, Narendra, refused to speak English. He communicated entirely in fast hand gestures.
And remember Cagle's visual impairment.
Exactly. He physically cannot track fast hand gestures. So he asks his shift lead, Kalpesh, to slow down the repair demonstration so he can actually see them.
And how does Kalpesh allegedly respond?
He allegedly responds by physically shoving Cagle out of the way and just doing the repair himself at top speed.
The compounding liability there is staggering if proven true.
It's crazy.
You have an employee being denied training in a language they comprehend while simultaneously being denied visual training at a pace their documented disability requires.
It's a double whammy.
It is. The ADA claim regarding failure to accommodate is now intertwining directly with the Title VII claim regarding national origin and racial discrimination.
But I want to push back on this a bit, just playing Dale's advocate using DHP's own filings.
Okay, let's hear it.
I'm looking at DHP's formal answer, and they openly admit that Narendra used hand gestures to train Cagle.
They do.
However, they claim he did so simply because his English wasn't very good. So if I am the defense attorney for DHP, I am standing in front of a jury arguing that this isn't some massive, malicious racial discrimination conspiracy.
Right. It's just incompetence.
Exactly. This is just a case of poorly managed, underfunded training program. Narendra wasn't malicious. He just didn't speak great English. Kalpesh wasn't racist. He was just an impatient boss trying to keep his production quotas high.
And that's a very strong argument, actually.
Because general incompetence and bad management aren't actually illegal in the United States.
Well, they are not.
So how do the plaintiffs pierce that incompetence defense?
The incompetence defense is arguably the most common shield utilized in employment litigation.
Yeah.
You are totally correct. It is not illegal to be a terrible manager or to run a chaotic training program.
Right.
However, the law distinguishes between general incompetence and targeted incompetence. Yeah. If DHP's training program is universally terrible, if every new employee, regardless of race, receives the same shoddy, fast-paced hand gesture training, then there is no discrimination. It's just a bad place to work.
Equal opportunity incompetence.
Exactly. But the plaintiffs are arguing disparate treatment. They're alleging that Gujarati-speaking employees were being properly trained and integrated, while the only 2 Black employees were being structurally isolated and basically set up to fail.
It's the selectivity of the incompetence that makes it illegal.
Precisely. And that brings us to the escalation from, passive exclusion to alleged physical confrontation and verbal hostility.
Yeah, this part is intense.
In April 2022, the complaint details an interaction between Robinson and the shift lead, Kalpesh.
The same guy who shoved Cagle.
The very same. The document notes Kalpesh is 6'4".
Big guy.
Yeah. He allegedly invades Robinson's personal space, towers over him, pokes him hard in the chest, and yells at him in Gujarati, using gestures to call him stupid. Robinson just walks away to the break room. But when plant manager Kylan investigates, Robinson, the one who walked away, is the one who gets sent home for the day.
And what happens the very next day is what truly cements the hostile work environment claim.
Yes, the meeting.
Right. Robinson and Cagle go to the production manager, Bolognese, to formally complain about this physical treatment. Bolognese allegedly just tells them to, quote, relax.
Classic dismissal.
But it gets worse. During this, an Indian coworker, identified only as Jay, overhears them, turns to Robinson right in front of the manager and says, "You got to calm down. You're an angry Black man."
Yeah.
And Bolognese allegedly does nothing. No discipline, no correction, just lets it hang in the air.
The introduction of that specific phrase, angry Black man, it changes the entire legal calculus of this case.
Completely.
In employment litigation, certain phrases carry historical and sociological weight that transcends a simple workplace insult.
Because if you are listening to this, you might think, well, it's just one comment from a coworker. Does that really constitute a hostile work environment?
Right. People say mean things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the psychological mechanics of that specific trope. The angry Black man stereotype is a deeply ingrained sociological tool designed specifically to invalidate legitimate grievances.
Perfectly stated.
When an employee raises a valid safety concern or a valid complaint about harassment, deploying that label instantly attempts to recategorize their justified professional frustration as an inherent race-based character flaw.
It flips the script.
It does. It frames the victim as inherently aggressive, thereby providing management with this psychological cover to just ignore the actual complaint entirely.
That is an excellent breakdown of the mechanics of prejudice in the workplace. Defense attorneys will often try to minimize these comments. They call them stray remarks or simple workplace friction.
Stray remarks, right.
But when a stereotype is used to systematically silence a protected class, and when management, like Bolognese, allegedly just stands by and tacitly endorses the use of that stereotype by doing nothing, it legally transforms the workplace.
It becomes hostile.
Yes. It signals to the plaintiffs that the company's hierarchy views their race, not their work performance, as the primary metric of their employment.
Yeah.
And add to that the plaintiffs' ongoing allegations that their specific machines were being purposefully sabotaged by Packers, while Indian operators' machines were left totally untouched.
Right. They had to constantly fix their own machines.
Yes. You combine all of that, and you have the absolute foundation of a pervasive hostile environment.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the focus now shifts entirely to management.
Yes, it does.
Peer-to-peer conflict happens everywhere, people argue. But how the corporate hierarchy responds to a formal complaint is often what determines the legal outcome of a case.
It's the cover-up, not the crime, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are moving from the factory floor into the HR office now. We are looking at systemic institutional response.
Right.
According to the complaint, in February 2022, plant manager Kylan holds a meeting for the machine operators. He talks about needing to, quote, change the culture and break old patterns.
That's good on paper.
Sounds great. He acknowledges there are issues. But immediately following this meeting, only Cagle and Robinson's shifts are reduced from 12 hours a day down to 8 hours a day. None of the other machinists on the third shift have their hours cut. The only two black employees take a massive pay cut right after complaining about racism.
We have now officially crossed the threshold into the legal realm of retaliation.
Retaliation.
Yes. And it is vital for anyone navigating the corporate world to understand that in employment law, retaliation is a completely separate cause of action from the underlying discrimination.
From my understanding of reading these cases, retaliation is actually much easier to prove in court than the original discrimination.
Oh, by far.
Why is that? Is it simply because there is a more tangible paper trail when management takes an action like cutting hours?
The paper trail is part of it, definitely, but the core reason is temporal proximity.
The timeline.
Exactly. Proving discrimination requires proving what was in someone's head. You have to prove that they cut your hours specifically because of your race.
Which is almost impossible unless they admit it.
Right. That is incredibly difficult. But retaliation relies on the timeline. If you engage in a protected activity, like complaining to HR about racism on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday your hours are slashed, a jury can easily connect those dots.
Juries understand that.
They do. Juries understand human vindictiveness perfectly. The sheer closeness in time creates a powerful circumstantial inference that the adverse employment action was a direct punishment for speaking up.
And the alleged punishment matrix just continues to expand here. Let's look at the safety meeting incident in August 2022.
Yeah, this is a textbook example.
The safety coordinator, Fard, is giving a quiz after a safety video. During this meeting, a white employee named Scott simply gets up and leaves without taking the quiz.
He just walks out.
Just walks out. Management says nothing. No discipline. Later, Cagle gets into an argument with Fard over a quiz question. He feels Fard is being verbally abusive, and Cagle leaves.
And what happens?
Immediately, HR manager Korzenko calls Cagle and threatens him with a week's unpaid suspension for walking out.
What the plaintiff's attorneys are doing right there is building a comparator case.
Comparator?
Yeah. In discrimination law, you have to show you were treated worse than similarly situated employees outside of your protected class.
It's the ultimate what about him argument.
Exactly.
Cagle is saying, look at Scott, white employee, exact same meeting, exact same behavior of leaving early, zero discipline. I do it, and I am threatened with a week without pay.
And the legal burden then shifts to the employer to explain the discrepancy.
Right.
If DHP cannot provide a legitimate, strictly policy-driven reason for treating those two employees differently for the exact same infraction, a jury is explicitly permitted to infer that racial bias was the motivating factor for the disparate discipline.
And right around this time, the situation just completely unravels. On August 3, 2022, Gerald Robinson is terminated. Fired. The company's stated reason is excessive absenteeism.
Right, attendance issues.
But Robinson counters that he was strictly following the call-out procedures because he was providing emergency care for his sick stepmother. He alleges the firing was the ultimate retaliation for his ongoing complaints.
And, the termination of Robinson leaves Cagle completely isolated on the floor.
He's all alone.
He is now the sole black employee on the shift.
Yeah.
And his disability issues are compounding at the same time.
Right. The ADA claims flare up aggressively here. Cagle is allegedly forced to run his machine at a pace of 200.
Which is very fast.
He notes that other operators are assigned packers to help them at that speed, but he's forced to run it entirely alone. And because of his severe visual impairment, he explicitly tells his supervisors it is physically unsafe for him to run the machine that fast without visual assistance.
It's a massive safety hazard.
So he proposes an accommodation. He says either assign me a packer like the other operators or allow me to run the machine at a slower, safer speed.
And that request, whether it's spoken verbally on the floor or written in an email, that constitutes a formal request for a reasonable accommodation under the ADA.
Just asking for it is enough.
Yes. Once that request is made, the employer is legally obligated to engage in what the law calls the interactive process.
Interactive process.
Yeah, it's a good faith dialogue to find a workable solution.
Well, the dialogue here apparently consisted of them refusing both options and then issuing negative performance reviews, specifically criticizing his machine speed.
Unbelievable.
It is the literal definition of setting someone up to fail.
It is.
And this all culminates in a truly explosive HR meeting in December 2022. Cagle requests to sit down with HR and the plant manager to discuss the ongoing hostility.
Right.
But he makes a very specific request. He asked that his direct supervisors, Bolognese and I Signore, not be in the room because they are the ones allegedly ignoring the harassment. He is asking for a neutral, safe space.
And the mechanics of how management handles that meeting are deeply, deeply consequential.
So he walks into the room, and Bolognese and Signore are sitting right there.
An ambush.
HR ambushed him. Cagle objects. HR overrules him. According to the complaint, HR then becomes hostile. They start raising their voices.
Wow.
And Cagle, feeling trapped and vividly remembering that angry black man stereotype that has been weaponized against him, realizes he needs to de-escalate before he is provoked into an emotional reaction.
He knows he's walking into a trap.
Exactly. So he stands up to leave the room. HR tells him if he walks out, he is suspended. He walks out anyway to avoid the confrontation. And DHP immediately hits him with a 1-week unpaid suspension for, quote, insubordination.
Look at the behavioral loop the plaintiffs are alleging here.
It's a cycle.
It's a brutal cycle. The employee complains about racism. He loses his hours. He asks for a safety accommodation for his blindness. He gets written up for being slow.
Yep.
He asks for a private, safe HR meeting. He gets ambushed by his alleged abusers. And when he tries to legally remove himself from a hostile situation, he is suspended.
There's one specific quote in this complaint that really shook me. It involves Supervisor David Signore in October 2022.
Oh, I know the one.
A complaint is made against Cagle claiming he left his machine dirty. Cagle gets pulled in for a reprimand. Cagle points out a logistical fact to Signore. He says, "I wasn't even working the shift when that machine was left dirty. It physically could not have been me."
A simple alibi.
Right, check the schedule. And instead of checking the shift logs, Signore allegedly looks at him, swears at him, and says, "Why does it fucking matter?"
Yeah.
If that quote is accurate, what kind of legal exposure does that create for the company?
It creates catastrophic liability during a deposition.
Catastrophic.
Absolutely. Because if an attorney gets a supervisor to admit under oath that objective facts, like shift schedules, do not matter when deciding to discipline a minority employee, they have effectively handed the plaintiff evidence of pretext and animus on a silver platter.
Wow.
It demonstrates that the discipline is not about policy. It is purely about punishment.
So we have thoroughly explored the plaintiff's narrative here, and it is devastating.
It is a tough read.
But any listener knows that an amended complaint is just a list of unproven allegations. A lawsuit is a battlefield, and now we have to look at the corporate shield.
The defense.
Right. How does a massive manufacturing corporation legally defend itself against these kinds of explosive claims? Let's dissect DHP's formal answer, which was filed in March 2024.
Drafting an answer in federal court is an exercise in extreme tactical precision.
It's not just a letter saying we didn't do it.
No, it is not an essay defending the company's honor. It is a surgical, line-by-line response to the complaint. The cardinal rule for defense attorneys at this stage is to deny everything you legally can, admit only what is undeniably true, and never accidentally concede liability.
And DHP is meticulous here. They systematically deny almost every substantive allegation of harassment and discrimination.
Of course they do.
They deny the wage promise to Robinson. They deny that the hand gestures were malicious. They deny that Bolognese ignored complaints. But they do admit some things.
Because they have to. You cannot deny objective reality without risking sanctions from the judge.
Right. So they admit the hiring dates. They admit Cagle received a final warning in July 2022. They admit Robinson was sent home after the Calpesh incident.
Paper trail stuff.
Yeah. And they proudly admit that Cagle walked out of that December 2022 meeting, branding it clear-cut insubordination that easily justified the suspension.
They are building a narrative.
They are saying that, yes, there was friction, but every action management took was driven by standard corporate policy, not bias.
But, the true defensive strategy isn't actually in the denials.
No,
it is in the back half of the document, the affirmative defenses.
I want to spend some time right here because reading through these affirmative defenses feels like watching a legal kitchen sink strategy.
Throwing everything at the wall.
Everything.
Yeah.
They claim unclean hands. They claim failure to mitigate damages. And the one that really caught my eye, they claim that DHP exercised reasonable care to prevent harassing behavior, but that Cagle and Robinson, quote, unreasonably failed to take advantage of any preventive or corrective opportunities.
Right.
If you're listening to this, that probably sounds like straight-up victim blaming. The complaint literally outlines them begging HR and plant managers for help constantly. how can the company claim they didn't use the opportunities?
It is victim blaming in a colloquial sense, definitely. But in a legal sense, it is a highly calculated maneuver known as the Farragher-Ellerth defense. Yeah, named after two landmark Supreme Court cases. The defense argues that if a company has an established HR department, an anti-harassment policy in the employee handbook, and a reporting hotline, the company has fulfilled its legal duty.
Just by having it.
Right. And if the employee failed to use those specific channels in the exact manner prescribed by the handbook, the company cannot be held vicariously liable for the rogue actions of floor supervisors.
This is a massive insight for anyone working in a corporate environment. We are conditioned to view human resources as a resource for the employee.
It's in the name.
Right. But the Farragher-Ellerth defense reveals that legally, the existence of an HR department functions primarily as a liability shield for the corporation.
Exactly.
By raising this defense, DHP is attempting to shift the jury's scrutiny away from the racist environment on the floor and redirect it toward the plaintiff's administrative compliance.
Right. They will argue, yes, they complained to Bolognese, but they didn't file the specific grievance form B12 with corporate HR within 48 hours, as per page 42 of the handbook.
That is wild. That is exactly how it plays out in court.
It is.
And let's look at the other defenses you mentioned. Unclean hands.
Oh, yeah.
That is an equitable defense, suggesting the plaintiffs themselves were acting unethically or breaking rules like attendance policies or insubordination, so they forfeit the protection of the court.
Right. You can't seek justice if your own hands are dirty.
And what about failure to mitigate damages? How does a corporate lawyer actually prove that?
So failure to mitigate is a fascinating and honestly deeply invasive part of employment law.
Invasive.
Very. If you are illegally fired, the law says you cannot simply sit at home for 3 years collecting potential back pay. You have a legal duty to actively search for comparable employment to mitigate or reduce your financial losses.
Okay, that makes sense.
But to prove you failed to do this, DHP's attorneys will use the discovery process to subpoena the plaintiff's job application records. They will demand access to their LinkedIn accounts. They will scrutinize their daily activities since termination.
They will stalk your LinkedIn.
Absolutely. DHP is putting a marker down. They are saying, even if we lose this case, we shouldn't have to pay full damages because these men didn't try hard enough to find new jobs.
It's a formidable corporate shield. Deny the events, justify the discipline via policy, and then put the burden entirely on the employee for not complaining correctly and not job hunting fast enough.
It is designed to exhaust the plaintiff.
But a shield only holds up if the judge agrees it is impenetrable. Which brings us to the climax of this legal chess match. March 5, 2026. Judge Janet C. Hall issues her ruling on DHP's motion for summary judgment.
And to understand the gravity of this moment, we really have to define summary judgment. It is the ultimate gauntlet in civil litigation.
It's the corporate attempt to pull the plug on the lawsuit entirely.
Exactly. After years of discovery, after the depositions are taken, after thousands of internal emails are turned over, after interrogatories are answered, DHP files a massive motion asking the judge to throw the entire case out of court before a jury ever even sees it.
They want it dead.
Yeah. DHP is arguing to Judge Hall, look, even if you look at all the evidence in light most favorable to the plaintiffs, there is no genuine dispute as to any material fact. The law is clearly on our side, and a trial is a waste of judicial resources.
And if a plaintiff loses its summary judgment,
their case is dead. Over.
Well, Judge Hall looked at the mountains of evidence, and she denies the motion. Almost entirely. The case lives.
Which is a monumental victory for Cagle and Robinson.
Huge.
And to understand how the judge reached this conclusion, we absolutely must explain the McDonnell Douglas framework.
Right.
This is the absolute bedrock of employment discrimination law in the United States.
Let me try to explain this using an analogy, because reading the judge's ruling, the McDonnell Douglas framework feels exactly like a high-stakes tennis match.
I like that.
The burden of proof is the tennis ball, and the court is making the parties hit it back and forth over the net.
Exactly.
Because in 1973, the Supreme Court realized a fundamental problem. Racist and sexist bosses rarely send emails saying, I am firing you because of your race.
Right. Smoking gun evidence almost never exists.
So they created this 3-step burden-shifting framework for cases relying on circumstantial evidence.
That tennis match analogy is perfect. Let's walk through it.
Okay. Step 1 is the serve. The plaintiff serves the ball. They must establish a prima facie case.
And this is a very low net to clear.
Right. You just have to show you are in a protected class.
Yeah.
You were qualified for your job, you suffered an adverse action, and the circumstances give rise to an inference of discrimination.
Very basic stuff.
And Judge Hall looked at the evidence, the demographic isolation, the angry black man comments, the lack of discipline for the white employee, Scott, and ruled that Cagle and Robinson easily cleared step one.
So the ball is over the net.
The ball is over the net, which shifts the burden to the company for step two. DHP has to return the serve.
Right. They must articulate a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for the adverse action.
And DHP hits it back. They say, we didn't fire Robinson because he's black. We fired him for violating the attendance policy. We didn't suspend Cagle because he's black. We suspended him for insubordination when he walked out of a meeting.
And on paper, these are perfectly legal, legitimate reasons.
Which brings us to the final hardest volley. Step 3. The burden shifts back to the plaintiff to prove that the employer's stated reason is pretext.
Pretext. That is the magic word in employment law.
What does it mean exactly?
Pretext means the company's stated reason is a cover-up.
Ah.
It's a lie designed to mask the true discriminatory motive. The plaintiff has to show the judge that the company's excuse is bogus.
And this is where Judge Hall's ruling gets incredibly incisive. Let's look at how she handles Cagle's suspension for walking out of that December 6 HR meeting.
Yeah, pay attention to this.
DHP says it was clear insubordination, but Judge Hall looks at the psychological context. Cagle had specifically begged for his alleged abusers not to be in that room. HR ambushed him with them anyway.
Right.
HR then got hostile. Cagle, terrified of being labeled the angry black man again, tried to de-escalate by leaving. And Judge Hall actually writes this in her ruling.
It's a powerful quote.
She says, quote, a reasonable jury could find that the events surrounding the December 6 meeting were designed to be inflammatory, cowing Mr. Cagle into silence out of fear of playing into the exact angry black man stereotype of which he was repeatedly accused.
That sentence from a federal judge is devastating for the defense.
Devastating.
Because the judge is validating the sociological reality of the stereotype. She's suggesting that a jury could look at HR's actions and conclude they intentionally set a psychological trap.
A trap.
Yes, they intentionally triggered the racial stereotype, knowing Cagle would either blow up emotionally, which justifies discipline, or walk out, which justifies discipline.
Lose-lose.
That is the very definition of pretext. The insubordination wasn't the reason for the discipline, it was the trap set to execute the discipline.
Wow. And what about Robinson's firing for absenteeism? How does the judge find pretext there?
Well, she leans heavily on the temporal proximity we discussed earlier.
The timeline again.
Exactly.
Sure.
Robinson was engaged in ongoing complaints about racial tension. Suddenly, he is terminated for missing work to care for a sick relative. Judge Hall rules that a jury could reasonably look at that tight timeline and conclude the attendance issue wasn't the real reason he was fired.
It was just a convenient excuse.
Right, a convenient excuse to permanently remove a whistleblower from the factory floor.
DHP also tried a technical maneuver to get the hostile work environment claim thrown out entirely. They argued that some of the specific incidents, like the early training issues, happened too long ago, outside the statute of limitations.
Yes.
But Judge Hall applies something called the continuing violation doctrine to save the claim.
The continuing violation doctrine is a vital lifeline for plaintiffs.
How does it work?
Well, the courts recognize that a hostile work environment usually isn't just one singular explosive event. It is a slow drip of poison over months or years.
Right.
So the doctrine states that as long as one act contributing to the hostile environment happens within the legal time limit, the court will pull in all the older incidents and view them as one continuous, ongoing, unlawful employment practice.
That makes total sense.
Because the plaintiffs were repeatedly subjected to the angry black man trope and ongoing isolation over a long period, Judge Hall ruled the entire timeline is admissible for the jury to consider.
And finally, she addresses Cagle's ADA claims. DHP argued they trained him. But the judge notes that Cagle's specific requests regarding the font size on production documents and his repeated requests regarding the pace of the machine training raised triable issues of fact.
Triable issues of fact.
Meaning, it is not up to a judge to decide if DHP tried hard enough. A jury needs to hear the testimony and decide if DHP actually engaged in the interactive process to accommodate his blindness, or if they just ignored him and penalized him for it.
And so, in the end, she denies the summary judgment motion across the board.
So what does this all mean?
It means the balance of power has violently shifted.
Yeah.
DHP is now staring down the barrel of a federal jury trial. Surviving summary judgment gives the plaintiffs immense leverage. Juries are inherently unpredictable, and corporate defendants are terrified of them.
I bet.
I mean, when a jury hears allegations of HR executives setting psychological traps and supervisors dropping F-bombs instead of checking shift logs, the financial risk of the company skyrockets.
Millions.
Exactly. This ruling vastly increases the likelihood that DHP will be forced to offer a massive financial settlement to make this case disappear quietly long before Cagle and Robinson ever have to take the witness stand.
It is a profound, sobering look at how power, policy, and prejudice actually function on the ground floor of American industry.
It really is.
As we wrap up, I want you, the listener, to take a second and evaluate your own workplace. Think about the dynamics we uncovered today. Are there subtle cultural or linguistic barriers being used to isolate certain groups? Are there unaddressed stereotypes floating around the break room that management is just ignoring or waving away with a command to just relax?
And, beyond the culture, look at the structure. We are taught to rely on human resources to be the neutral referee in workplace disputes.
Right.
We are told the system is designed to protect us. But when we look at the affirmative defenses deployed in this case, we see that the legal structure often incentivizes HR to protect the company from liability above all else.
Even if it means setting traps.
Even if it means setting traps, weaponizing policies, or blaming the victim for not filing the right paperwork, it forces a critical question: where does an employee actually go for justice? Is the true lesson here that in the modern workplace, you cannot rely on the institution to protect you, and you must become your own meticulous legal advocate from your very first day on the job?
A heavy but absolutely necessary question to ponder as you navigate your own career. Thank you for joining us for this extensive exploration of the realities of employment law. We will catch you next time.
If you like the Employee Survival Guide, I'd really encourage you to leave a review. We try really hard to produce information to you that's informative, that's timely, that you can actually use and solve problems on your own and at your employment. So if you like to leave a review anywhere you listen to our podcast, please do so. And leave 5 stars, because anything less than 5 is really not as good, right? I'll keep it up. I'll keep the standards up. I'll keep the information flowing at you. If you'd like to send me an email and ask me a question, I'll actually review it and post it on there. You can send it to mcarey@capclaw.com. That's capclaw.com.